r/AskReddit. Historians of Reddit, what is the biggest docu moment in history? In the 1970s, a small town of Vulcan, West Virginia asked for state funding to replace a bridge into town. The state legislature refused to grant Vulcan the funding they needed. Instead, the town appealed to the Soviet Union for aid. After hearing about the request, the state legislature immediately granted over $1 million for the town to build a new bridge. If a small town in WV asking for Soviet funding in the middle of the Cold War isn't a big middle finger to the state government, then I don't know what is. The funny part is that 2 Soviet representatives at the US Embassy actually came over to look at the broken bridge and seriously considered funding the rebuilding to piss off the Americans. When Otto von Bismarck was about 50, he was walking down a street when a man ran up to him and shot him 5 times. Otto then turned around and began to beat the absolute shit out of him until some armed guards come to help him. When they inspected Otto for wounds, they found that all 5 hit, but they all either just grazed him or bounced off his ribs. Literally the Iron Chancellor. German quality. My hero. His whole career was just a series of escalating docus. Small or concealable handguns used to suck. They really did. If you look at the calibers they used, they were all really anemic heavy clothing. Could take most of the oomph out. The biggest advancements in firearms in the last 100 years have mostly been materials. Bismarck's life is ducking awesome. Early in his political career he said to someone when yelled the Bavarian people fought for a constitution. He replied the people of Bavaria didn't fight for a piece of paper, but for their freedom, and the Prussian parliament exploded into the usual loud screaming match, and so Bismarck just read a newspaper until the shouting match ended. So when France exiles Napoleon Bonaparte, the first time, they didn't think to change out military personnel. So he basically rolls up to the first French outpost he gets to, says backquotes up, and begins reassembling an army. By the time he gets to Paris, he's got enough forces that France is like, well, welcome back. The French newspapers, which, in 1815, were subject to the censor, announced the departure of Bonaparte from Elba, his progress through France, and his entry into Paris in the following ingenious manner. The 9th of March, the Anthropophagus has quitted his den. 10th, the Corsican ogre has landed at Cape Juan. 11th, the tiger has arrived at Gap. 12th, the monster slept at Grenoble. 13th, the tyrant has passed through Lyons. 14th, the usurper is directing his steps towards Dijon, but the brave and loyal Burgundians have risen en masse and surrounded him on all sides. 18th, Bonaparte is only 60 leagues from the capital. He has been fortunate enough to escape the hands of his pursuers. 19th, Bonaparte is advancing with rapid steps, but he will never enter Paris. 20th, Napoleon will, tomorrow, be under our ramparts. 21st, the Emperor is at Fontainebleau. 22nd, His Imperial and Royal Majesty, yesterday evening, arrived at the Tuileries, amidst the joyful acclamations of his devoted and faithful subjects. He supposedly said to the first soldiers he encountered, "Any of you who dare oppose the Emperor, fire." The soldiers cheered and joined him. Guess who's back? Back again. A pirate known as Jane Leffert had a bounty of $500 put on him by a governor. So he put a $5,000 bounty on the governor. No, I'm a French quarter tour guide. I tell this story every day. He also helped Andrew Jackson out at the Battle of New Orleans against the British. That's not even Jane Laffert's best docu moment in my opinion. He was propositioned by the British. Basically, hey, show us how to navigate the swamps around New Orleans so we can launch a sneak attack, and the king will pardon you and make you a privateer. And he was like, give me a fortnight to consider it. So he snuck over to the governor's mansion, scaled the outside wall, and was waiting for him on his office. Told the governor and Andrew Jackson the British plan and offer, and how he wouldn't betray New Orleans because he loved her. So all he asked was for a pardon and he'd give them everything they needed to win the war. And he did. Napoleon invited his brother-in-law to speak with him before his coronation as emperor to remind the brother-in-law that he objected to Napoleon marrying Josephine because Napoleon would amount to nothing. Now this is the kind of petty duck I can get behind. You know how I'm ducking your sister, right? Well, I'm the emperor now too later. What a slap. What I'm getting from this whole thread is that the biggest duck in history was just Napoleon in general. The Australians stealing a tank from no man's land in WW1 because they could. That just sounds like Australians in general. What makes this even better is that the tank is the only German World War I tank that has not been dismantled. I believe this is referencing the tale of the only German A7U tank that is called Mephisto still in existence, that is located at a railway museum in Brisbane. I recommend listening to a podcast of Conversations with Richard Fiddler that explores the whole issue because it's truly fascinating. Long story short, the tank got bogged and the Australians claimed the position after some months, and one general saw that tank and basically launched a heist to claim it for Australia. There was actually a division of the Australian army that were out to take as many souvenirs as possible. The reply of the Zaporozhian Cossacks is the best response to a demand for surrender ever. In response to requests by the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire to desist attacks and submit Zaporozhian Cossacks to the Turkish Sultan. O Sultan, Turkish devil and am devil's kith and kin, secretary to Lucifer himself. What the devil kind of knight art thou, that canst not slay a hedgehog with your naked ass? The devil shits, and your army eats. Thou shalt not, thou son of a whore, make subjects of Christian sons. We have no fear of your army. By land and by sea we will battle with thee. Duck thy mother. Thou Babylonian scullion, Macedonian wheelwright, brewer of Jerusalem, goat ducker of Alexandria, swineherd of Greater and Lesser Egypt, pig of Armenia, Podolian thief, catamite of Tartary, hangman of Kamenets, and fool of all the world and underworld, an idiot before God, grandson of the serpent, and the Krikinardic. Pig's snout, mare's ass, slaughterhouse cur, unchristened bro, screw thine own mother. So the Zaporozhians declare, you lowlife. You won't even be herding pigs for the Christians. Now we'll conclude, for we don't know the date, and don't own a calendar, the moon's in the sky, the year with the Lord, the day's the same over here as it is over there, for this kiss our ass. Kashovai Otam and Ivan Serko, with the whole Zaporozhian host. The Sultan sent them this letter. As the Sultan, son of Muhammad, brother of the sun and moon, grandson, and viceroy of God, ruler of the kingdoms of Macedonia, Babylon, Jerusalem, Upper and Lower Egypt, emperor of emperors, sovereign of sovereigns, extraordinary knight, never defeated, steadfast guardian of the tomb of Jesus Christ, trustee chosen by God himself, the hope and comfort of Muslims, confounder and great defender of Christians, I command you, the Zaporozhian Cossacks, to submit to me voluntarily and without any resistance, and to desist from troubling me with your attacks. Honestly, he was begging for a roast, and the Cossacks delivered in spades. Ooh. Subtle. This requires some background. The Spartans were famously blunt. They were trained to get to the point when speaking, instead of using artsy and beautiful language that would have been common at the time, by being bitten on the thumb if they became long-winded. Now to the meat. Philip II of Macedon, Alexander the Great's father, sent the Spartans a letter saying, would you like me to enter your land as friend or foe? The Spartans responded with one word, neither. Philip was irate. He then sent another long-winded message. If once I enter into your territories, I will destroy ye all, never to rise again. The Spartans then sent back one word. If. It was like putting your head in a lion's mouth and I love it. That's where the meaning of laconic comes from. Exactly. Laconia is pretty much another name for Sparta, and the people were called Lacedaemons. This is already one of my favorite threads in Reddit history. Galvarino, Chilean warrior who had both his hands cut off by the conquistadors for raising arms against the Spanish. Instead of letting himself serve as a message of helplessness in the face of the invaders, the crazy bastard strapped swords to his stumps and went on the warpath. So this guy was ancient Chilean Wolverine? May I add that when he got defeated again, the Spanish were impressed and offered him to surrender, but he spit in the commander's face, so they literally fed him to their dogs. Forgive me if I'm wrong. When life gives you lemons, weaponize them. Don't forget about Corpalican. Dude was so badass. When he got captured by the conquistadores, he was condemned to die by impalement. When he was on the platform ready to be executed, he kicked his executioner off the platform and impaled himself with a spike. Mapuches were really brave and badass. British prisoner of war in Nazi Germany stitches a quilt. The Nazis put it out for show. Hidden in Morse code, stitched in were the words "Duck Hitler" and "God Save the Queen." Edit: "God Save the King." I think I just had the Queen song stuck in my head. This guy was such a ducking Chad. At the bottom was a Union flag, added Tony. National flags were forbidden in the camp, so Castigli sewed a canvas flap over it with "Do Not Open" written on it in German. Each week the same officer would open the flap and say, "This is illegal," and Pa said, "You're showing it." "I'm not showing it." Symphony No. 7 by Shostakovich was played in besieged Leningrad, and it was broadcasted on radio, so Nazi soldiers could hear it. Imagine hearing "Duck You" from a city that you thought was already dead. In the 1950s, Elias Berg, the orchestra director, had a visit from a group of East German tourists. They went to see him, and they told him they had been soldiers in the German army just on the edges of the city. They were listening to the broadcasts of that orchestra concert. They were about as hungry and frightened as the Russians. A lot of them didn't want to be there, but they didn't have much of a choice. They told Elias Berg that when they heard the performance of Shostakovich's symphony, they understood that a city of people who showed such spirit would not capitulate. One is reported to have said that his comrades shed tears when they heard the music. They were about as hungry and frightened as the Russians. Laughs in second best fed nation in the entire war. In the late 1980s, Nintendo and Sony developed a CD add-on for the Super Nintendo. Nintendo then pulled out of the partnership and opted to work with Philips instead and released the CDI. This move was highly frowned upon because Nintendo had decided to ditch a fellow Japanese company over a foreign one. So Sony picked up the pieces of the project and tried to partner with Sega. The board of directors turned the idea down, saying that's a stupid idea. Sony doesn't know how to make hardware. They don't know how to make software either. Why would we want to do this? At the end, Sony released a game system by the name of PlayStation in 1994 to compete with the Nintendo 64 and outsold their former partners nearly 3:1. It marked the first time that Nintendo wasn't top dog since they released the Nintendo Entertainment System. I still remember the Christmas being told in the game store when asking for a N64, "Man, the N64 is cool, but it doesn't have many games. Get the PlayStation." 10-year-old me listened to the guy despite loving Nintendo up to that point. Eventually did get a 64, but definitely got more mileage out of the PS. The first cell phone. The first call ever made from a cell phone was to a competitor's landline. Big dick energy. Tell me more. Martin Cooper, a Motorola employee and inventor of the first cell phone, called his competition at Bell Labs. "Stop sending people to kill me. We've already captured 5 of them, one of them with a bomb and another with a rifle. If you don't stop sending killers, I'll send a very fast working one to Moscow, and I certainly won't have to send another to Joseph Stalin." If someone made a black comedy TV series about the Eastern Bloc, this would be one of the highlights. You've reached the end. You're a star. Destroy the subscribe button for more like that.